I'm Ben Meiselas from the MeidasTouch Network, and this is a breaking news alert. The deadline for Donald Trump to respond to the January 6th committee's subpoena for records, documents, emails was set for November 4th, close of business. That deadline has come and passed. However, we have learned that Donald Trump's lawyers from the Dillon Law Group had reached out to the January 6th committee before the expiration of the deadline and requested a brief extension of time to respond, not guaranteeing they were going to turn over records, but asking for additional time to respond to the subpoena. The January 6th committee granted that request, but made it clear that documents would need to be turned over next week, and that Donald Trump's deposition, which is set for November 14th, would not be moved, and that they intended to proceed with Donald Trump's deposition on November 14th and for documents to be produced before then, although granting a brief extension of time for the documents to be produced. Let me read the statement that the January 6th committee has released. They have stated the following: "We have received correspondence from the former president and his counsel regarding the committee's subpoena. We have informed Trump's counsel that he must begin producing records no later than next week, and he remains under subpoena for testimony starting on November 14th. And what this means is that the January 6th committee is unlikely to move the date for Donald Trump's deposition testimony, which was set for November 14th, but they did grant a brief extension of time for the production of documents and records. I still think that the January 6th committee, nor am I, have any degree of confidence that Donald Trump is going to agree to produce records in response to this subpoena. But what the January 6th committee is doing here is what any good lawyer would recommend that they do, which is to build a record that they are trying to be accommodating. So when Donald Trump does not respond and does not produce the records and does not show up for depositions, Donald Trump would not be able to make the argument later to a court that he simply asked for a brief extension of time and that the January 6th committee failed to accommodate him and that they set this deposition date very quickly and the subpoena of records return date very quickly, and that it would be improper for them not to grant an extension and to exercise collegiality. And you would say, well, why would they do that? Why would you be collegial to a criminal? Well, one of the things that Donald Trump does as part of his delay tactic is to take advantage of the norms of how these processes and procedures generally take place. But in almost all circumstances, in any litigation that I have or any lawyer has, even when you're dealing with bad faith actors and their attorneys reach out and request a first extension, if you don't grant that extension as a lawyer, what you're basically doing is allowing your adversary to go to court and to tell the judge, look, I was just trying to be reasonable and we asked for an extension. They didn't give us an extension and then they held us in contempt. Look, counsel, Mr. Meiselas, or in this case, the January 6th committee, they're playing games. They're just trying to set really quick return dates and then seek contempt. They're not even trying to work with us. That's what Donald Trump was trying to set the January 6th committee up for here by requesting this extension. He was hoping the January 6th committee would say no. And you may say, I wish the January 6th committee said no here and just put their foot down, and why the hell would they grant an extension? Well, if you'd like to feel good about it and you'd like the performative nature of that occurring, sure, the January 6th committee could have done that. However, it would ultimately backfire if your goal is for Donald Trump to eventually be held in contempt of Congress for his failure to produce records and for his failure to show up for a deposition, by them not granting the brief extension of time, would not fulfill the ultimate goals that I think we would all like to see here. And the January 6th committee recognizes that, and any good lawyer who's consulting with the January 6th committee would say, look, do exactly what you did here. Do not move the deposition date. Keep the deposition date intact. Give a brief extension of time for the documents. This way, if you have to litigate this issue before the court, you can say he asked for an extension. We were being reasonable. Look, we did what we could do here. Now, the question is, do you think that Donald Trump's actually going to produce records? Do you think he's going to show up for his deposition on November 14th? Well, on the one hand, you have Alina Habba, Donald Trump's personal lawyer, who has stated that she says that he should. And Alina Habba, well, let's play the video of what Alina Habba says. Play this clip.
He's got a couple options here. He can ignore the subpoena and maybe run into a Bannon world, or he can go and plead the fifth, or he can go and testify. Any idea what you think he's going to do, and what would you recommend?
I would recommend that he cooperate, because when you have nothing to hide, that's what I always recommend. The same reason that he always comes out and speaks on any of my cases. He has no issue being deposed, even though the left-wing media would like to pretend that he does. He has no issue being subpoenaed and answering questions about what happened that day, and he shouldn't. What he did was very public, and it was really nothing other than to say to go out peacefully, as we know.
And then in addition to Alina Habba, you have Sarah Palin, who says that I think that Donald Trump is definitely going to do it. Here, play the clip.
Knowing President Trump as I do, he's probably saying, bring it on, subpoena away, because he has nothing to hide. And no, I don't believe that he committed a crime. I think that the media and those who are obstructionists to so much of what Trump represents, I believe that they just want to hang on to this thing and keep stirring it up. They got to hang on to something, because it can't be his policies that they slam and that they are against. Look what his policies did for our country.
Okay, but look, Alina Habba and Sarah Palin are completely wrong here. We know that Donald Trump and all these MAGA extremists are complete and utter cowards here, and there's no way that they're going to, like Donald Trump, like all the MAGA extremists, is not going to show up to his deposition. But one interesting ruling which may impact what takes place here, which has not really been talked about recently, but we have talked about it here on the MeidasTouch Network if you've been following these videos, is that when Mark Meadows filed a lawsuit against the January 6th committee to block his deposition and to block the subpoena for his records, that case went before a judge, Carl Nichols. And you may know Carl Nichols. He's the judge who oversaw the Steve Bannon criminal case, and he's a D.C. federal court judge who's seen many of the January 6th cases. But Carl Nichols made a very interesting ruling in the Meadows case, which I think could actually have a very big impact here on Donald Trump. And I think Donald Trump's lawyers are paying attention to that. And what Carl Nichols said is that under the speech and debate clause immunity that is given to members of Congress, Nichols said that should also apply to congressional committees, such that any lawsuits for injunctive relief brought in that case by Meadows, and here I think it would apply to Trump, but anyone trying to sue the January 6th committee for injunctive relief to stop them from issuing subpoenas, that there's no jurisdiction for federal courts to hear the case under speech and debate clause immunity, which is under the Constitution, which basically states that members of Congress, which has also been applied to congressional communities, have civil immunity from lawsuits, which Judge Carl Nichols says is also injunctive relief, and he says it functions as a jurisdictional issue, and that's how he dismissed Mark Meadows' lawsuit. So now the January 6th committee, and that just happened. That happened on October 31st. So now the January 6th committee is going after Meadows' phone records, which Meadows tried to hide, as well as trying to seek Meadows' deposition. Meadows is going frantic and trying to appeal that. But I think the January 6th committee is going to use that with Trump here as well. So if Trump tries to go in front of the courts and say, courts, you need to stop this from happening, I think you're going to see what Carl Nichols did, other federal courts are going to do and say, we don't even have jurisdiction to do this. You can't file a lawsuit against the legislative branch, against Congress. That's protected by the speech or debate clause. And then it's basically saying to Congress, Congress, pursue your remedy. Hold them in contempt, refer it to the DOJ, and then see where it goes. But the court is not going to intervene. So watch for that. You'll see when that happens. I think that's how it plays out. You can watch this video when you see that's eventually what Congress is going to do, cite speech or debate clause immunity, say Trump can't sue them to stop his testimony. He can't go to court to stop it. And I think that's what's going to happen. But we will see. We'll keep you posted here. But the big news is that Trump's lawyers are engaging, at least for now, with the January 6th committee. A brief extension was given. No one has any real, I think, confidence that Trump is going to actually respond. The January 6th committee, though, wants to be reasonable before the courts, before the DOJ, before anyone who looks at it down the line and say, look, we've done everything here to try to accommodate, but we draw a line here. He's just playing games. We had to seek contempt of Congress, and that's the process that's going to be taken. But we will keep you updated here. We'll see what happens on November 14th. And I don't think it's a coincidence that people are also saying that that is the date that Trump claims he's going to announce that he's running again for president, that it's the same date when he's set to be deposed. But we will keep you posted here as well. I'm Ben Meiselas from the MeidasTouch Network. Hey, hit the subscribe button right now. We're on our way to 1 million subscribers. It's free to subscribe, so what are you doing if you don't subscribe? Hit subscribe right now. Also, if you want to support independent media like this, here's what you need to do. Go check us out at patreon.com/MeidasTouch, patreon.com/MeidasTouch. There's a number of memberships there that you can join. Join whatever one you like. If you can, no pressure either way, but it's a great way you can support independent media like this. We're not funded by billionaires or millionaires or any outside investors at all. We're purely fueled by you and democracy, and it would go a long way to help our network. So whenever you ask, what could I do to help? That really would help us a ton. So if you can, great. If not, no worries, but check us out at patreon.com/MeidasTouch. Until next time, I'm Ben Meiselas.
At MeidasTouch, we are unapologetically pro-democracy, and we demand justice and accountability. That's why we're spreading our message to Convict 45. That's right, gear up right now with your Convict 45 tees and pins at store.MeidasTouch.com. That's store.MeidasTouch.com.